Generally speaking, I would love to see prices tell the ecological truth. If that is the case, we need no protectionism. But today, prices are always pulled down. This is the ideology of today's competition. Everything has to be cheap, cheap, cheap. And that ruins nature and the possibilities for future generations. So, in reality, we have to find a compromise. We can, in line with WTO ruling, say this kind of procedure or product is destroying much of nature, therefore we raise prices against import, tariffs. That is a possibility of a compromise in line with WTO rules. But in addition, I find it necessary to change the WTO and the competition thinking. Competition so far is essentially always to have as low prices as possible. And that is maybe good for today's generation, but very bad for future generations. So the concept of competition has to be changed. In the early post-war years, post-Second World War, the then European Economic Community established rules that would create unrestricted trade among the 6 members at the time, but now it's 28. And so I understand why the competition and market commissioners want Ukraine to have free export. But those rules were created under condition where forests in Europe were not in danger. And today, forests are a very precious good. And I find it perfectly legitimate for a country like Ukraine to say, we want to limit the export of timber. That is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and I find it courageous and good of Viktor Halasyuk to do the right thing for Ukraine. And if I'm speaking with people in Brussels, I will tell them. I find it a clever idea by Mr. Kleiner that today's world markets contain elements of colonialism. This is not specific for the EU, it's even worse for North America against South America, etc. But it is based on an ideology that colonialism was with guns and swords, and trade is benign and does not harm anybody. This is a self-deception. It's not correct. In reality, today's markets mean that the strong, in certain aspects, are beating the weak and thereby colonizing them. And therefore, I believe we have to reformulate the philosophy of economics so that not destruction and colonialism occurs as an unintended result of free markets. Ukraine makes the experience that Germany has made many times, that wars make your country weaker. On the other hand, if there is an aggressive situation, I understand that you try to defend yourself. But I would not separate the war situation from the economic situation. But I would like to invite Russia to work on common benefits by peace, with some kind of common understanding of the Minsk agreement and of a non-military negotiation, finding out what is best. More I can't say. Of course, there may be economic mistakes on the part of industry, on the part of agriculture, on the part of government, on the part of trade unions, I don't know, which may have contributed to the unpleasant economic situation. But I am unable to judge, simply by not knowing. Under today's conditions, I don't blame the individual investor. He does what the conditions of markets are. So I find it more important to find an agreement between business and the state of changing the frame so that the investor, the business person who is doing good things also for future generations will make more profits than the one who is destroying. That, however, means that prices must tell the ecological truth. However, that in the first beginning means that the poor people in the countries stand up against prices telling the truth. Like in France, we have seen it with the yellow vests. Those were the people against prices telling the truth. So people don't want it and find it better for them to destroy the future of their children. This is a problem. So we have to find a compromise there. And for that, I have essentially two different answers. One is what Canada, Switzerland, and Sweden are now doing. They have introduced a carbon dioxide tax, but the revenues from that are evenly distributed in the people, so that the poor people actually get a little richer and the rich people a little poorer. So they have no yellow vests. This is one part of the answer, one possibility, one option. And another one is what I have advised the Chinese government years ago, to increase prices of nature consumption year by year by year for 100 years if necessary, in proportion to the documented efficiency increases, so that the monthly expenses of families for mobility, for food, for living, for goods, etc., will remain essentially stable. And then still some privilege for the poor families, because if the rich get quickly much more efficient, then the price would become higher also for the poor, who have not become richer, not have become more efficient. So this has to be negotiated out with the poorer, the political representatives of the poor. this is possible. But anyway, the main effect is that investors know that nature destruction becomes ever more expensive year by year by year by year. And then they will refrain from doing it. I believe that if we go by this carbon tax redistributed or the small increase of energy prices, you will see the car companies becoming mobility companies that would invest in public transport, because the private engine car becomes ever less competitive year by year, and the public transport becomes more and more competitive year by year. So the main idea that I'm proposing is make it so slow that there is not a clash down for industry, nor additional poverty for people who can't afford any longer, but do it in line with technological progress. And this is what we have done with labor productivity and wages. Labor productivity rose, and then wages rose, and then labor productivity rose further, and then wages went further. And this ping pong went on for 150 years, leading to a 20-fold increase of labor productivity, which is the basis of our wealth today. But today, labor is not in short supply, labor is not ineffective, but nature is in short supply and is ineffective. So we better switch this ping pong gradually from labor to resources and energy. That would be a strategy leading business, the traders, and the consumers gradually into a new kind of mentality, technology, understanding, perception of what is wealth. Today, wealth is owning a car. 30 years from now, it should be being mobile. So this kind of changes can be anticipated and politically created in a way that you don't have rebellion by the Yellow Vest kind of people. I see no reason why developing countries should be left behind. When we in Germany introduced the feed-in tariffs law, many people in developing countries said, oh, only those rich people in Germany can do it, and we can't. This is complete nonsense. It was a bonanza for Africa, for India, for South America, to finally have decentralized renewable energies. And the same, in a sense, applies to efficiency. The developing countries are much closer to the understanding of being efficient instead of wasteful. The rich are the wasteful. And they would leave more resources for developing countries if they become more efficient. It doesn't damage the developing countries at all. I mean, William Stanley Jevons, 150 years ago, made a great and important discovery that the efficiency of the steam engine by James Watt did not reduce demand for coal. Although the steam engine was 4 times more efficient than the earlier steam engines of Newcomen. So one would have thought with a more efficient machine you need less coal. And the opposite happened. This was Jevons' discovery. Why? The answer is very simple. The steam engine was so efficient that you could put it on a car, and then you had a steam locomotive. So you could build a railway, which was impossible before. And all of a sudden, you had a huge demand for additional coal because of efficiency. This was Jevons. Brilliant. Now, what's the answer? The answer is not ignoring the Jevons paradox. No. That doesn't help. The answer is making prices higher. In the times of Jevons, coal got ever cheaper because the mining got more efficient. And so the economy did not suffer at all from scarcity of coal, although that was the title of the book by Jevons, The Coal Question. He calculated that a few decades from his time, there would be no coal left in Britain. Well, that was geographically correct, but he did not know how much coal was there in Colombia, in South Africa, in China, in India, in America. So he would not be worried. That's history. No. My main answer is make in small steps in parallel with efficiency increases the costs of natural resources more expensive. The opposite happened over the last 200 years. I have a curve, which is also in my slideshow, that over 200 years, year by year, with a few exceptions, natural resources got cheaper. And this is an invitation to confirm the Jevons paradox. And I want the opposite. Make it more costly to destroy nature. And then, if that is predictable year by year, you will see the engineers becoming faster, efficient, and you will see the consumers saying, now we have to switch. Not to become poor. This is nonsense. Nobody becomes poor if my proposal is a reality that in line with efficiency increases, prices go up. This doesn't make people poorer.
Why?
Because the efficiency is compensating the expenses. I mean, if you, like for LED lighting, the LED needs 1/10 of the electricity for the same amount of light compared with the incandescent light bulbs. Overused, they will next time not buy another incandescent light bulb, but an LED. So the lighting luxury will not be reduced at all. But the price signal prevents families from wastefulness. And this is what we need. I see no energy scarcity. I see no energy scarcity coming, but I wish and see a reduction of energy consumption. These are two very different animals. The conventional idea is if we have less energy, we have energy poverty. This is wrong. This is plainly wrong. As I was mentioning in the context of the LED, if you want more light, my recommendation is use more efficient light bulbs. Don't use 10 times more inefficient light bulbs. This is crazy. Make use of technological progress. And then you will discover, let me tell you now what I said in the public, the Mount Everest story. How many kilowatt hours would we need to lift a 10 kilograms heavy bucket of water to the top of Mount Everest, 8,800 meters high? And the answer in physics is 1/4 of a kilowatt hour. That's unbelievable. But essentially it means we have a huge abundance of energy once we begin to use energy efficiently. And then we don't need one single nuclear power plant, single coal power plant, and what the sun and wind and hydro and perhaps geothermal and remains from agriculture and forestry in terms of biomass, if they are becoming available, you will see we live in abundance of energy. I understand, of course, that in the media everybody is talking about electric cars. But this is only half of the truth. The internal combustion engine is extremely efficient. Including compared with today's battery electric cars. Per kilogram of fuel, the internal combustion engine is 10 times more efficient than the electric car. Because the electric car has these dinosaurs of heavy batteries. So, this is the physics part of it. And then you go into the production of the fuel. In Germany, we have so much wind power that under certain weather conditions, the electricity from wind is too much for the grid. It has to be destroyed because it's too much. The grid can't absorb it. And then a German car manufacturer, Audi, decided we will be using that wind energy which is otherwise destroyed and create car fuels out of that. Either hydrogen or methane, and both for internal combustion cars. So we have a climate neutral internal combustion car. What want you more? So the idea that only the electric car is climate neutral is wrong. and it is particularly wrong under the condition that we have in Germany today, that more than half of the electricity comes from coal. So one recipe is to learn, relearn what 200 years ago was natural. Think long term. Today's civilization is brutally short term and has the sarcastic optimism that whenever we do something wrong, we will find a solution. This is cynic. Okay, long-term thinking, including the use of the precautionary principle, which in Europe is a law. In America, they hate it. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing is, indeed, a little more specific. We need regenerative economies, which, by using nature, don't destroy nature. The mining economy is the opposite. By definition, mining means destruction. A regenerative economy is made like an ecosystem. Whatever is used is replaced and replenished, and nothing gets lost, essentially. So, regenerative kind of economy. And then the third thing is political. We need to agree on prices telling the ecological truth, not overnight, but in a long-term trend. It can be 200 years, why not? Gradually approaching high levels of prices, so that wastefulness will disappear from the civilization.